Well, welcome once again to the I Care About Books podcast. I think this is 10. This is 10, right, Graham? Is it 10?
Yep, this is number 10.
This is 10. I can't believe it. I mean, we have been having so much fun reading all of these different books picked out by this glorious team that you can see here tonight who are joining me. Graham, the founder of Book Notification. Hi, Graham.
Hello.
My cousin Angela Maxwell, who is a librarian in Ottawa, Canada. Hi, Ange.
Hello.
And Vince Morales. Do I say that right? I always just call you Vince or V. Like, I want to make sure I got that right.
It's Morales, yeah.
Okay, all right, close enough.
Yeah.
Vince, of course, our entertainment editor here at Book Notification, and this was a book that we picked this week, selected by Graham. And before we get into that, just a couple of quick things. If you've not read the book, this is your warning that there will be spoilers. We talk about the book in length, so if you're planning to read it, you might want to just hold off on listening to this podcast and maybe come back to it and see if your comments and opinions align with ours. And also, sometimes we get into some profanity or obscene language. I don't think we're going to find any with this book. It's a very wholesome book, but there you go. You've got your warning now. So we will start things off by chatting with Graham and why he picked Tuesdays with Morrie, which is considered, oh, there's my cat if you can't hear it. Tuesdays with Morrie, which is considered a classic, and it's gone on to sell millions of copies, and people have really resonated with this book. Graham, why Tuesdays with Morrie?
Oh, the reasons weren't too deep, really. We hadn't had a non-fiction book yet, so I thought it'd be cool to do a non-fiction book, and this one was quite short, which is even better. So I went with this one. It does have a interesting backstory to it, to where he only started writing the book to pay for Morrie's medical bills, and then it wasn't actually, it got rejected by all these publishers, and then its first run it didn't sell well, and then Oprah pushed it, and suddenly it became a huge hit. So it had that interesting backstory, and I appreciate the power of people like Oprah and the book club and just promoting in general. And yes, for those who don't know, Morrie, by the way, spoiler, he dies at the end. He's basically, it's basically a real life final college course in which he reconnects with his old professor after hearing that he's dying, and they meet every Tuesday to talk about the big topics in life like love, regret, family, death. And what makes it really hit and have more impact is that Morrie knows he's running out of time, that he's going to die. So you get that brutal honesty that you wouldn't get from people who still have plans in life and so on. He knows he's dying. He knows the end is nigh, and yeah, you get this very honest, essential memoir told in third person.
Yes. A great synopsis. Like, that was fantastic. Angela, as a librarian, you have read more books than anybody I know. Had you read this book before Graham had selected it for the book club?
Well, I did, but I read it again because, as you said, it's short, and I read so many books I can't always remember what they're about.
How about you, Vince? Had you read this book before it was selected?
No, I had not, no.
So what did you think, though, like after you'd heard that? I know you'd heard of this book. We'd all heard of this book. But what did you think of the book?
It was well written. The thing with a book like this is I just don't think it's for me. Like, I never had like living grandparents. I never had a mentor. I never had the closest I ever had was the old drunks at the bar. So
I'm not your mentor.
Yeah,
that's news to me. Okay, wow.
So like that part, and then some of like the real powerful lessons just seem like common knowledge to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just the way I was raised, or my own just being an amazing person.
But, I think that's fair. I mean, I think. And I wanted to talk to Angela about this. It kind of fell at an interesting time because we lost our grandmother a year ago this month. And so, it was, for me, reading this book, I mean, I didn't spend a whole lot of time with her in those last few months. She lived pretty far away from me. Did get to see her in that final week, but I know your family was there and with her every single day towards the end. And I had just wondered if you had put those sort of two things together as you were rereading this book.
So I actually didn't, and the reason I didn't is because I have a friend who's living with ALS. And so that's who I was thinking of when I was reading this, because the first time it didn't resonate with me at all. But having a friend who not only is living with the same disease, but has the same positive attitude to it, which I find incredible, because in my opinion, that has to be the worst disease that you can get, because it slowly eats you away. And so just watching him kind of go through the stages of that, and he's now, at the point where he can only communicate through, they bought him a Stephen Hawking type device where he can, use his eyeballs to make the machine talk. So he can still communicate, but he's kind of stuck inside his body. And I asked him, what does he miss? And he said, I miss the taste of coffee. And then after I asked him, I thought, what a horrible thing to ask. Like, why did I do that? But that's what was interesting about the book, is that those questions aren't off the table. You're interested to know what it's like to be inside that body. And so Morrie was able to tell that to his student.
And I also love the coincidence that we're filming this on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else picked that up, but this is actually a Tuesday night that we're filming this episode, which is just great, because the idea of it being Tuesdays with Morrie, and what readers will find throughout the book, was that actually as his student, Mitch would connect with Morrie on Tuesdays. That was their long day of the week where they would sit down and they would talk about his thesis, they would talk about his grades and his future aspirations. And Morrie consistently said to him, we are Tuesday people. So I thought that was really neat that this sort of coincidentally fell on a Tuesday that we were going to be speaking. So Angela, for you, I mean, I can feel, just in your talking, how this book really did resonate with you. But let's swing the pendulum a little bit. Tell me about how you felt about the writing of this book. I mean, outside of the messaging, I really found that Mitch Albom does an amazing job of imagery, and his writing style, where he will pose a question to Morrie, but he doesn't have himself in quotes. Morrie responds conversationally in quotations, but when Mitch is speaking to him, he'll just reply in a way that sounds like he's speaking in his mind, but in fact, he's actually talking to Morrie. What did you think of the writing style?
Well, I mean, it was very simplistic, but I don't love the fact that he didn't put his own speaking in quotations. It kind of threw you at a minute, because you wonder if he's saying it out loud or if he's thinking it. But that was a unique way of presenting it. But I think it was interesting the way they divided the chapters up to be, okay, today we're going to talk about this specific aspect of the process that he's going through, and it kind of has that overarching progress of his disease. So as he goes further down the path towards the end of his life, then he gets into the deeper questions that they wanted to discuss.
So Vince, I wanted to ask you about this book. I mean, now you've also said that you didn't necessarily have like an emotional connection to the book necessarily, but what I really loved about this book in terms of you as a reader, Mitch is into sports, and there's so much pop culture that's written throughout this book. I wonder then, did you find so much of that fascinating as we're going through the OJ trial, for example, or hearing references from the 60s? Or I really love that one part where what Mitch would do is he would read Morrie's newspaper clippings or newspapers that were sitting out while he'd be off doing something. And one of the newspaper clippings was about the guy who went and killed the man who said he had a crush on him in a talk show. And I don't know if you guys remember that. That was a pretty significant.
Jones.
Yeah. There was so many significant like pop culture moments that kept the story going far outside of this conversation that Mitch was having with Morrie. What did you think about that, Vince, especially as our entertainment editor?
I thought it was kind of interesting with like the OJ trial in particular, where they're like, Mitch and his wife seem to be living and dying by it, and Morrie's just like, I got other things going on. But one thing I did like a sports pop culture thing is, ALS was like basically discovered with Lou Gehrig, so it's called Lou Gehrig's disease, the old baseball player, and then just like everybody making fun of him, like, can you believe it's like an athlete's disease? Like, you're far from an athlete, Morrie, or whatever it was. I thought that was an entertaining part.
And did you pick up all the pop culture references? Like, could you say to yourself, "Oh, I remember when that happened. Oh, I remember when that happened."
Maybe not quite a remember, but I was definitely around.
I
for,
think
a lot of
friends that Vince has just told us that he's much younger than we are. I just want you guys
No,
to know.
no. But just, I don't know. You don't care about the news as much.
I was like super fascinated by that because it helped me tell in time, because I didn't read a whole lot about this book leading up to this book. So I didn't really know what time or place that it was sort of set in. And
Okay.
I found myself as somebody who's kind of a pop culture junkie following it along going, oh yeah, well, I remember being in grade 8 when that happened. Or I remember, being in early high school when that happened. So that helped me pinpoint certain parts of the story, which I thought was really, really cool. Although, does anybody here actually know the Ted Koppel show from NBC? Does anybody remember him? Graham, over to you.
I mean, I didn't grow up here, but I do remember having seen it as part of pop culture over the years, and I did go on YouTube after and look it up. So I loved the whole thing, the whole OJ trial, all the news stories it was referencing, just because it helped ground me in the time that the book was taking place, so that really helped for me, because it kind of put me back to the 90s as I was reading and picturing it, so I really appreciated that. I thought it really helped set the scene for each thing that was taking place.
So Graham, I sent something to you today because I said I didn't want to forget to say this, because there was a part of the book that I thought was really, really cool. And maybe Angela, you can even speak to this, because knowing somebody that is actually going through this currently, ALS is like a lit candle. It melts your nerves and leaves your body a pile of wax. And for someone on the outside who has no connection to this disease, hasn't known anybody that's going through this, that just resonated with me. And that was very early on in the description of this disease and inside the book. But it also speaks to Mitch as a writer. And Angela, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but when you read these words, what did you think? What was your first reaction?
Well, because it is like a candle, but it's also like drowning in a way, right? Because it's starting kind of at your feet and it's working its way up. And that's why Morrie kept saying, when it hits my lungs, then I'm gone, right? And so that's sort of the same as drowning, in the sense that when your lungs fill up with water, then, that's the end. And so it's like going, and he said this too, it's like going back to being a child, because he was able to walk for a bit, and then he had to be cared for. And, there are certain milestones that he didn't want to reach. And once he reached them, he learned to embrace them. And I thought that was sort of interesting as well, because he said, the thing I don't want to have happen to me is for someone to need to help me use the washroom or whatever. And then he said, actually, this isn't so bad. It's like being a child. And so that kind of aspect was kind of woven into it. His acceptance. He's like, I'm okay with everything up to this point. And then he reached that point. He said, oh, I'm okay with this. And I think that's sort of what my friend is doing too, is just trying to be okay with what's next, just but taking it one step at a time.
So now for each of you, we know that inside this book, what was most important to Mitch was that he wrote down what he wanted to discuss with Morrie week over week. So every week had something sort of centralized, and they included culture, marriage, money. Like, there were all sorts of things that he really wanted to discuss with Morrie and get Morrie's vibes on. And this was all part and parcel of like bringing that recorder with him and getting Morrie's words. And I love the idea that Morrie spoke with his hands, and he spoke so freely and so on. And that was what really made him afraid of losing his voice or his hand gestures, because that's how he emphasized his language. But my question for each of you, and Graham, we'll start with you. which of all of these Tuesdays and all of these various conversations that he'd had with Morrie resonated with you the most?
I mean, I think just the general, well, at the part, where Morrie once said, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live. I think that entire message is what basically sums up the entire book. And what Angela said earlier about asking a friend what they would miss, and they said to taste the coffee. I think that is a big part of that whole thing. Like, it's about those things in life that we do take for granted, that we don't, what the taste of coffee, taste of a cup of tea, you don't really think about it. And so it's about using a situation like that to appreciate that type of thing. So for me, that's it, is because, yeah, to have a timeline of when you're going to die, it's coming, that changes everything and changes the way you live. So for me, just that entire, is probably the purpose of the book, and that is what I really took away from it.
All right, you're not getting off that easy. I'm sorry. You get to pick one. You get to pick a Tuesday. I love your sentiment. I love that you love the book, but you have to choose. You have to choose. Was it emotions? Was it death? Was it marriage? Which of the Tuesdays really resonated with you, Graham?
Of the ones, I would say marriage is a big one, because I think a lot of us do kind of take that for granted, honestly. Like the way he focused on how important it is to have that person and so on, Yeah, I marriage was definitely one, but I think reading it, I'm like, yeah, I think people do take marriage a little bit too much for granted. We just kind of assume. Meanwhile, you have this partner that's going to be with you till the end, in theory, and so on. So that would be the one for me, I think.
I think that was really interesting for me reading it with Mitch's commentary, where he was saying how his generation seems to look at marriage so differently now. And were we being selfish by waiting to get married? Or were we selfish in what we expected of marriage, which I thought was a really interesting sentiment, because, we're seeing the divorce rates much higher than they were when Morrie was getting married to the love of his life, right? So I thought that part was really interesting as well. All right, Angela, over to you. Which of the Tuesdays resonated with you the most?
I can't say I memorized all the Tuesdays. I think the moment that I remember the most is the conversation that Morrie had with Mitch's wife, because we still don't know what he said. And Morrie's, I kept asking him to bring his wife. He said, my wife doesn't want to come. And then something happened behind the scenes. And next thing you know, she's there. And so there was that kind of dynamic between Mitch and his wife, but also between Morrie and his wife, because she's going through this with him. And she's the one at the door who's taking those food bags every time. And also trying to not tell Mitch that you should stop bringing food. He doesn't need it. And she just dragged that out as long as she could until she finally said, this fridge is full. Please stop.
Please just, if you're going to blend it up, pre-blend it. That probably really would help Morrie. Pre-blend the food. Vince, over to you. What was for you the Tuesday that resonated with you the most?
Maybe not in so much as sentiment, but the family chapter where he talked about Mitch's brother, who's like a big personality, who moved to Europe, but then he got sick as well. And then it just goes into like Morrie's relationship with his family, and but what it stuck with me is just like I also have like a brother with like a really big personality who kind of like overshadowed me in some ways. And then but then it just ends with like a memory of Mitch with his brother, and then just like a crazy time they had when they were kids that like he'll always remember. And that hit for me because it's just like that's how I mostly interact with my brother these days, is just like with a memory like that, not so much anything present day. So
I think for me, it's going to have to be the death chapter, when they actually sat down and got into the nitty gritty, because the one thing that Morrie keeps talking about over and over and over again is dying with dignity, and dying with this sense of it's okay to die, and we need to stop being so afraid of dying, or we need to stop being so embarrassed by being afraid of dying. Like, I thought that part for me was really interesting, because I mean, if you've known anybody in your life that you were close with that have passed on, there becomes this really interesting clarity that happens towards the end where they suddenly become very peaceful and very calm. So we wander through life being afraid or denying that death actually happens. But then when we get there, we have to be okay with letting it happen. And the fact that Morrie called himself lucky that he was going to get this chance to say goodbye and die on his terms, in the sense that he could choose optimism and he could choose to be with his friends and family and have a living funeral. How cool was that? Had a living funeral, and refers to himself as lucky, even though he's dying this horrific way. I thought that part was really interesting. But it leads me. Go ahead, Graham. Yep.
I was going to say, I love to live in funeral, and that should be a thing that becomes a tradition. It makes so much more sense than an actual funeral, you know, like, yeah, we should have more living funerals. Even if someone's not even close to dying, we should all get together and party and celebrate that person. So
we call those birthdays.
Oh, okay.
But I promise we should actually do that. We should, you know, at some point in our lives, just get together to celebrate a person and tell them what we loved about them while they're alive and they're able to hear it. However, this leads me into my next question. And Ange, I'm sorry to exclude you on this, but it's for the guys tonight, because so much of this book talks about that, the idea of masculinity, and how crying, kissing on the cheek, you know, Mitch having to help Morrie in those final days when he first arrived feeling super uncomfortable, talks about the way Morrie would eat his food, and then it was how he would cough, and then it was holding hands by the time Morrie was dying in his final days. And there's a lot of conversation that Morrie goes on about with how men become very squeamish and becoming uncomfortable or embarrassed by the sentimentality of it all, and feeling that way. So I want to ask the guys how they felt about those messages in the book and how they maybe apply to your lives. And did you find any truth to it? We'll start with you, Graham. Go ahead.
I mean, I went through all that stuff. I went through it with my dad. He was diabetic. He lost his leg. You know, he had a stump. He would have to use a porta potty thing in the bathroom. There was times where it tipped over, it fell. He was on the floor doing that. And I had to clean it all up, deal with all that. You know, he's rolled around the ground basically like naked, covered in feces and all that stuff. And I just dealt with it. It was what you do, you know. So when I was reading that, it definitely brought me back to that type of thing. But I just dealt with, you know, you just deal with stuff. That's the way it is. And then in regards to, I mean, the whole masculinity aspect and not crying, all that stuff. I mean, definitely there are a lot of dudes that are like that. But me, I would say me and Vince aren't people like that. I'm pretty sure we've cried in front of each other, watching wrestling before, or talk, you know, we've talked about a TV show and we're like, oh, that was really sad. I cried, you know. So there's definitely a large group of people who are like that, obviously, but that's not me, Vince. So you know, there's people like that, but I couldn't relate to it because, yeah, all the squeamish stuff, you know, you just suck it up and do it. Basically, it's part of life.
Graham, remember when we were playing 1,000 Years by Christina Perri?
Mm-hmm.
You are in touch. You are in touch with your soul. You sure are.
Yes, I am.
Vince, over to you. Tell me, what did you feel about that part of the book where Morrie continues to sort of really talk about male sensitivity and being okay with love and touch and a kiss on the cheek, and eventually Mitch getting to a point where he wasn't squeamish anymore?
You know, it's not anything to me now, but this book was written 32 years ago, and or even longer than that. And Morrie was not young, so that is probably like pretty groundbreaking for someone like him, and even like from probably the Mitch at the time, Mitch Albom, because, you know, that was, you know, gay was the worst word you could call someone back in the early 90s. But, you know, I honestly think they just don't go far enough. I mean, I think they should be kissing on the mouth, hugging, showering, everything.
I love that you said that, because one of the things about the Tragically Hip was that Gord Downie was known for kissing his bandmates on the mouth at the end of a great performance or a great concert, and so much so that when Gord passed, they wrote this very great tribute to him, and at the end of it, it was sealed with a kiss on the mouth. And I just thought that was a really neat tie-in that I noticed throughout that book, and I was thinking about how Gord passed away as well. Now, when it comes to this book, Angela, I'll go back to you. We deserve a question here too, we chicks. So when you're reading this book, and this is the second time that you've read it, could you see why people resonated with this book, and was it warranted because the book is great, or because people just found sentimentality in it? What do you think? Do you think that this book is a great read, or do you think people will latch onto it because it's one of those tug at your heartstrings books?
I think, having read it twice, that it really depends on where you are in your life. Because if you've not had to deal with death before, you would be uncomfortable to read it. But having seen and been next to, people as they're going through that stage of their life, you kind of see that it's also a lesson in how to support someone at that time. And that's always difficult. I mean, when you are kind of at someone's bedside and there's maybe someone there visiting with you and they ask a really stupid question, this person has a week left to live, and they say, do you plan on seeing any good movies? Or some stupid question like that. And you're like, why would you ask them that? They have a week left. Why would they waste it watching a movie? And so being comfortable with other people's, end of life phases is something that you learn over time. And so I think that once you've gotten to that point where you not necessarily have seen it for the first time, but have become accustomed to it and comfortable with that, then the book becomes better. Right. So it's not just making you feel uncomfortable. I hope I never have to be around a dying person. It's like, it's okay to be around a dying person. It's okay to feel what I feel. It's okay to touch the person. It's okay to do whatever he or she needs as we're at this point in life. So I think that's why it was more interesting to me the second time.
And my final question to the three of you before we get into ranking this out of 10 bells, one of the coolest parts I found in the book was when Morrie described his perfect day. If he was able-bodied and capable of being able to enjoy the day exactly as he would want to spend it, it included getting up and going for a walk and then a swim and spending time with his friends and loved ones. And Mitch says, I was prepared to hear him say he wanted to fly to Italy, and that would be his perfect day, but that wasn't the way that Morrie wanted to spend his life. His perfect day was being able to do the everyday things. So now, magic wand this, my friends. I'm going to start with Graham. What is your perfect day if you had one day left?
Reading a book. Reading all day long. That's pretty much it. No, I mean, also my perfect day would be getting up, going for a run, and then going out to a pub with my family and having a few beers, and yeah, just enjoying that. That's pretty much my perfect day. And then coming home and then reading by myself and, drinking a cup of tea and sobering up so I don't get too hungover for the next day. But yeah, that's really it. It's a nice chill, quiet family, pub, drinks, beer, reading, running. That's be good. Kill me tomorrow. I'm fine now.
Angela, over to you. You've got one day left. Tell me, what are you going to do to make it the perfect day?
This is pretty easy because I spent last week doing perfect day after perfect day. But it's basically, there's a castle, and then you walk through the gardens and you see new birds you haven't seen before. And yes, then there's bubble bath and book. So it's all the good things.
Awesome. All right, Vince, what's the perfect day?
I guess I've had a little time to think, so a little time. I would say probably like get up around 9 or 10, go to like brunch, a late brunch, then go to a Mariners game. Then after the game, hang out, maybe go to dinner, go to a pub, see where the night takes us. That would be good enough for me.
Awesome. And My perfect day would be if I could fit every one of my hobbies into one day, which I cannot do. So if I could spend one day where I knitted something to completion, I baked a cake to its completion, painted a window to its completion, and was able to read a favorite book all the way through, and I could do it all in one day, that would be the perfect day. So a perfect day for me would be able to do everything I love to do in my hobbies that I have to scatter through my day-to-days to make happen. And of course, it would happen in some wildly cool country that I had not yet visited. So that would be my perfect day. My friends, it is at that time of the podcast where we are going to rank this book out of 10 bells. And just for kicks, I want to start with Vince, because I have a feeling that Vince did not get out of this book what maybe some of us did. So Vince, out of 10 bells, what would you rank Tuesdays with Morrie?
Yeah, I can see how this, to a certain person at a certain point in their life, will be a 10 out of 10. I'm just not that person. It's probably a gentleman 6 for me. Like Angela said, the writing is kind of simplistic. It's written for a huge audience. It's written for everybody to read, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a positive thing, but it's just there's nothing about the messages or the writing that really grabbed me or really stuck with me. So yeah, just a gentleman 6. I don't hate it. I respect anyone who likes it a lot. I'm just not that person.
All right, Angela, over to you. Out of 10 bells, and you've read it twice. This happened last time with the Littlemores.
Well, I did read Littlemores because I wanted to read it twice. You know, I still am only going to give it a 7. I think that a book that gets more than a 7 to me, I would remember it, you know. And so it didn't stick with me. And to be quite honest, it probably still won't stick with me, even though it's that I'm at a different point in life now. So it doesn't have enough layers of complexity to be, you know, an everlasting interest to me. So,
all right, Graham, over to you. It was your pick out of 10 bells.
I'm also going with a 7. Actually, it seems like, you know, it was short. It was to the point, bullet point. I enjoyed that aspect of it because sometimes a lot of nonfiction drags on. There was no time wasting or stuff like that. The writing in that sense was very good. It was accessible. It was flowed well. But I also did have the problem Angela did with the lack of quotations for him talking and his thoughts. And unlike a Cormac McCarthy novel where as you're reading it, it just kind of sticks with you, it never did stick with me. Like all through the book, I'm like, wait, is he thinking that? Is he, you know? And so it was an easy read. I'd recommend people read it because it's an easy book to fly through. For its time, I think it did teach that generation a lot of life lessons because back then, especially, people were, as I said, just kind of nose to the grindstone folks and work, so on, not taking a minute to, you know, like appreciate things. So that I think we're a little bit more aware of that these days. So yeah, overall 7 out of 10. It was good. I enjoyed it. I don't know if I would read more about him. I am going to watch the adaptation of it, but that's going to be. I don't know if you guys have watched it. It's Hank Azaria and Jack Lemmon, and I actually watched the trailer earlier. And it looks like they've got an extra storyline on it where his wife, Janine, actually hates the amount of time he's spending with Morrie. So there's this whole drama. So that'll be interesting. So that's got me intrigued to see, you know, why you spend time with that old man who's dying? Spend time with me instead. So maybe that doesn't make marriage as important anymore, but we'll see how it goes.
I am also going to give this a 7. It was one of those books, and I read this really fast. I don't know how fast you guys whipped through this book, but I got it done. I'm not exaggerating. I got it done in less than 2 hours. It was a very fast read. It was not written, like Angela was saying, it was not written in ways that you had to go back and be like, okay, who did that, when, where, like, what's the name of that person to, you know, sometimes you do that in books where you have to go back a page because you accidentally glossed over it. So this was, like Graham said, straight to the point. Like Angela said, very simplistic. And for me, I'm glad to have read it. I thought it was a cool message. I think it's a good reminder that we should keep our loved ones close, and we should, really try to spend time in the living years with people. And I do have mentors. I do have grandparents I've watched past. So this, for me, I thought it was a great book. I think it was deserving of a read, but I'm probably not going to read it again. I recommend it if you're going through something. Read Tuesdays with Morrie. That's kind of where I'm going to land. So yeah, 7 for me as well. Now, that all being said, we do have to assign next month's book, and we're going to give that honor over to Vince. So Vince, you've got a book for us to read for the next issue. Edition.
Yeah, my pick is the 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. No, I'm just kidding. I actually have heard that's a much better book. I've heard.
I did hear that too. I did want to read that one.
Someday we'll get to that one. But my pick is called Beartooth by Callan Wink. It came out last year. 2 brothers in dire straits, living on the edge of Yellowstone, agree to a desperate act of survival in this taut, propulsive novel reminiscent of the works of C.J. Box, Donald Ray Pollock, and Larry McMurtry. I know those are 3 of Angela's favorites.
I haven't read Larry McMurtry, at least.
Has anybody read this book yet?
No.
Okay, so this is great. So we've got a book that none of us have read. Vince, as everybody would like to know, of course, how long is this book? Because we're chasing the Poisonwood Bible that Angela recommended last August. So how long is this book?
Great book. I stand by that book.
Me too. 256 pages. So
okay, so it's not a super long read. Give it to us again. Beartooth by whom?
Callan Wink.
Callan Wink. So that's who we're going to be reading next month for the I Care About Books podcast. That will be episode 11, which is really exciting. Again, I'm so grateful to have the 3 of you here to chat with me every month, talking about brand new books. And we'll give it one more time. Everybody, what did you rank this book out of 10 bells? Vince, go ahead.
I was a 6.
6. Angela.
7.
Graham.
7.
And 7 for myself as well. That for Tuesdays with Morrie. Make sure you do pick it up. Give it a read, because I'm sure you'll probably enjoy it. And we will be back next month for Beartooth by who again, Vince?
Callan Wink, who is a fly fishing guide.
What would I do without you? Be sure to jump on over to booknotification.com. While you're there, sign up, subscribe, and get notified. Thanks again to my special guests, and we'll see you next month. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Well.